ברוך האור בעולם, ברוך האור באדם, ברוך האור בשלום, בשלום, ברוך האור, ברוך האור בשבת.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and Chag Shavuot Sameach, Happy Shavuot, which starts on Sunday night. Tonight, as we celebrate Shabbat and this ancient Jewish holiday, we remember the texts, the traditions, the fruits of our heritage, and the power of welcoming people into the tents of our community. These are the themes of Shavuot. But we are also doing all of this in the shadow of a horrible conflict, a conflagration, if you will, in the birthplace of our traditions, a place of great beauty and inspiration, and one that also has been home to too much horrible violence and injustice. In a moment, we will celebrate and learn, but first we must acknowledge the horror and suffering, joining with a world weary of this hardship and such injustices, as we are hopeful for a time when the land called Israel and called Palestine will at last be a home to two free peoples. We offer these thoughts. May those who love that land and their people soon know the true blessings of peace. May we who watch from afar lift up the hands of those who seek to banish fear, anger, and hatred from that land. May the children of Israel and of Palestine no longer spend their nights in tears. May their parents cease to despair, the darkness cast from their hearts and their lives. May a new dawn appear in which honoring the dignity of all people expels the vanities of hegemony, the legends that that land was intended for but one of the peoples of this earth. May those who dwell there and we who live elsewhere at last recognize the supreme necessity of all of this. May they and we learn to see the beauty of life in each other. May they and we practice mercy and extend justice to one another. May they and we show real compassion for one another. May they and we build a new Jerusalem, a shining, true city of peace, centered on that ancient hill, where at last the words of the prophets shall be fulfilled, and nation shall no longer lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore.
לא יישא גוי אל גוי הרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי הרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי הרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי הרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי הרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי הרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי הרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי הרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה.
In traditional synagogues, the holiday of Shavuot celebrates the mythos of receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. During the morning service, congregants rise as the reader of the Torah recites the most famed of all religious laws, the Ten Commandments. Tonight, in our own humanistic way, let us now recall that tradition with these 10 ideas to improve our world. May we open our hearts to all the possibilities of life. May we value people over possessions and meaning over materialism. May we speak the truth with honor and respect. May we take time for joy and wonder. May we forgive ourselves and others. May we protect and nurture life. May we be faithful to those whom we love. May we be generous of spirit. May we learn what it is to walk in our neighbor's shoes. And may we cultivate gratitude. One of my favorite Shavuot traditions, at least since I've arrived at our congregation, is to honor our departing high school seniors. And tonight we are going to wish Mazel Tov, congratulations to Nathan Schechter, who is graduating from Roper High School and will be moving on to Haverford College in Pennsylvania this fall. Nathan is one of the most outstanding young people that I've ever worked with. He is, in addition to having a great intellect and wonderful curiosity, he is kind, he is funny, he is a terrific young person. All I can say is that our community's temporary loss is Haverford's gain. I want to thank his family for hosting Arthur and me at their home this week, and where they gave us wonderful treats, including some of those made by Nathan. And that's where I had an opportunity as well to do our traditional book celebration, though it was not like I enjoy doing from the Bima. I was able to present him with a copy of my favorite translation and commentary of the Bible, and also a book about biblical archaeology. These are two subjects we studied together, and I want to congratulate him for all of his achievements and his family. Mazel Tov to you, Nathan. While it is not the most observed holiday on the Jewish calendar, neither is Shavuot a minor holiday in our tradition. Historically, it stands with Sukkot and Passover as one of the three most ancient of our celebrations. The holiday was originally agricultural, but over time, it came to be associated with the story of receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. New traditions developed too, like staying up all night to learn and eating cheesecake or other dairy foods to mark how our textual tradition is like our mother's milk. One more tradition also evolved, reading the book of Ruth, the story of the world's most famous Jew by choice. For that reason, I view Shavuot as a celebration of welcoming people to our community. And that's the topic of our visit tonight with Alicia Chandler. Alicia is a writer, speaker, and consultant who works on issues of inclusion of intermarried couples and families in Jewish spaces. She is the founder of Multi-Faith Life, LLC, a consulting firm that exists to help Jewish institutions and the Jewish community adapt to the increase in interfaith families. Something we learned in the Pew Report this week is giving our communities great strength. Alicia is also a co-founder of New Detroit, the digital platform for local news blogging that we learned about last week. Alicia is currently a graduate student in sociology at Wayne State University, where she studies intercultural families in the Jewish community, and she holds degrees from the University of Michigan and Harvard Law School, and has done coursework at Hebrew College. She is a past recipient of the AJC Detroit's Community Leadership Award and has served as a Wexner Heritage Fellow. She and her husband have two children, one of whom is celebrating his bar mitzvah this very weekend. Here's the wonderful conversation we had earlier this week. Alicia Chandler, Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach, and also Mazel Tov on your son's bar mitzvah. It's this weekend, which makes me especially grateful that you took the time to meet with us. Those of who are watching, we're filming this very early in the week because you've got a lot to worry about as the week goes on. This being Shavuot, a holiday that I like to use to center the welcoming of new people into our community, and that includes people who come from different cultures, different backgrounds, who join our community via marriage. This is an opportunity to speak to you about the focus of your study. You are a PhD candidate in sociology, I believe.
Almost. I'm a graduate student to be coded to PhD later this summer. So
okay.
I always want to be technically correct. I also have a legal background.
So you and you are, from our pre-conversation, you're deeply steeped in the literature and in the experience. So tell me a little bit about what your interest is, what you're studying, what you're seeing, and I'll just turn it over to you.
Absolutely. So I'm thrilled I've been interested my whole adult life in the issue of intermarriage in the Jewish community. And it's one that's very personal to me, and a story that's very familiar to many people. At 19, up at U of M, I fell in love with and eventually married my Catholic husband. And I had no idea at that time what that meant for my Jewish identity, and more importantly, what that meant for my place in the Jewish community, and whether when I returned one day to the Detroit Jewish community that I came from, would I have a home still? And that was something that was really hard and occasionally traumatic for me. So as I moved into being a Jewish lay leader, this was something that always was a big part of who I was. And eventually I chose to leave my career in the legal profession and return to graduate school. And I'm now, as you said, sociology at Wayne State here in Detroit. And my focus is to study what it means for the Jewish community to have, at this point, 58% of our recent marriages in the community be to people who define themselves as being from outside the community. And what does that mean for any community when the majority of the community is marrying out? And how does that change us as a people? Many people might put a negative spin on that. I tend to live a way more positive spin on that experience. But it's very interesting to me what this means for us on an individual level, but also this communal level. And Judaism in America is something that is new and different and evolving. And that's what I hope to study, continue to study for the rest of my career.
So you mentioned your husband. Does he identify with the Jewish community? Is he a member? Does he consider himself a member of the Jewish community?
I always hesitate to speak for him because he tends to be more eloquent on his own experience. But my husband, he very much will always identify as a Catholic, is still a mass attending, church going, 100% Roman Catholic. With that being said, this week we're practicing because he will give one of the aliyahs alongside me for our son's bar mitzvah, which, by the way, will not be the first aliyah he's given because I chose to do an adult bat mitzvah and he did an aliyah alongside me at my bat mitzvah. So he lives this dual life that I think many interfaith families do of he's not Jewish by religion, but he's very much a part of the Jewish community. And again, what does that mean? Where are those lines? And I think many of us who are involved in the community know that we sit alongside people who are members at our congregations, who are volunteers at our social service agencies, who are important parts of our community who do not define themselves, at least religiously, as Jewish, but they're still part of our community. And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
So if we're going to talk about defining yourself religiously in some way or another, the movement for humanistic Judaism, of course, has all kinds of discussions about that, being that we have sort of a unique and unconventional way of understanding what that means. So that doesn't bother us one bit.
No, and I know we talked about this before. That's my family heritage also. I was raised fourth generation at Workman's Circle. So I come from a long line of very proud secular Jews. And when in my religious journey, and I think part of what has always impacted me, this was actually, something that one of your prior guests, Rabbi Denise Handlarski, mentioned, the story of like, do we live the Judaism of our grandparents? My grandparents thought I was the strangest thing when I turned out to be a theist. That was totally unheard of in my family. So we, within the bounds of Judaism, so, some people might think their kids are weird, for going a secular route. I come from a secular route, and it was thought very strange when I declared one day I believed in God.
Well, our extended Jewish family, as people know from my own background and my children's backgrounds, and we have a great deal of variety, and it covers a lot of ground. But you talk about boundaries a little bit, and one of the things that I find, and it's unique as a humanistic rabbi in the community, is that while my boundaries are essentially non-existent, and I don't seek or even understand anymore, though I once did very, very well, this gatekeeping role that a lot of rabbis had. You're out there in the more what I call conventional Jewish world, and without mentioning names of this or that or the other, there are, and I experienced it throughout my career before coming to humanistic Judaism, there are boundaries there. There are congregations that have limits on the aliyah, the blessings that a person who's not maybe considered fully Jewish by their standards can make. There are all kinds of boundaries and border controls that are in place. Not just how you feel about them, but how do you think that impacts upon our ability to welcome people who may have more than one identity, as your husband and many others have?
And I should mention that my children have too, because my children are being raised in what we call multi-faith or multiple religious belonging in a more technical academic sense. So I think many people come to Judaism from different places. And I think on the whole, I understand from an academic perspective and a lived perspective too, that sometimes we need certain boundaries. We have labels that we give ourselves. There are people that are in a category or out of a category. And I don't want to negate that totally. With that being said, I think we have most of the gatekeeping and most of the boundary setting that we do within the community is very unhelpful for the community. So one thing that I like to phrase back when I'm, talking with someone or working with a group is, okay, you have this rule. Why? And what's very interesting is, when we're talking with our friends in the Orthodox community, okay, they very much trace their rules back to halacha, and this is where they come from, and this is and it's a logical framework. It may not work for most of us, but there's at least a framework. Sometimes we've held on to gatekeeping in ways that don't make any sense at all. And I had a conversation with a rabbi where they just said, well, we could never have a president of our congregation that wasn't Jewish. And I said, well, why? And we sometimes get into these circular arguments. Now, most congregations will never have a president who is not Jewish. But why would you need that in your bylaws if you had that person come up and they were the right person to be president of your congregation? Like, God bless, that's a wonderful thing. And many of the rules are do we need this rule? Or is this rule there for some other purpose? And problematically for me, from my perspective, is that purpose to exclude someone? Because for anyone who's ever been on the other side of that conversation of, well, your children can't attend this religious school because X, or I can't marry you because X. Now, there might be a flip conversation, which I think can be a really beautiful conversation of this, I'm a rabbi, I'm going to meet with you and your partner about your life situation. And at the end of that conversation, maybe I'm not the right rabbi to marry you, but maybe I'm going to now take your hand and introduce you to the person I think will be the right person to be a part of that simcha, of that celebration with you. That's beautiful. That can be beautiful. But when it's exclusion for the sake of exclusion, I think that's can be very ugly and very disempowering. And we ask why people walk away from the Jewish community. That's it. And I will tell you, the most heartbreaking conversations I have in the work I do is when I talk to someone who, oh, my grandmother was Jewish, my mother was Jewish. Oh, no, I have no contact with the community. And sometimes that's just a different choice that was made, but a lot of times there's pain behind why that choice was made. And that always breaks my heart.
A few years ago, I had the opportunity to participate in the I forgot what the exact name is, but the Jewish People's Planning Institute, I think it's called. You're probably familiar with this. There's been various iterations of this over time. And we had a big get together at, I believe it was Sharet Tzedek in the library there. And we separated into tables and everything was about this topic. And I was the only person who, obviously from a humanistic point of view, said, everyone belongs. If you identify as a Jew, we consider you a member of the community. We don't ask questions. We don't, as the Hebrew expression goes, we don't check your tzitzit. We don't, try to see how long your fringes are. That's none of our business. How people identify is how they identify. Every question that was posed to us by the leaders of this is, who could do this and who could do that? Who could be the president? Who could make an aliyah? Who could do, et cetera, et cetera. Would you fund it? Would you not fund it? I always bring it to some absurd conclusions for them so they can see this. But you are expressing something that I do not frequently, and I've been doing this for over 30 years now, that I do not frequently hear outside the humanistic world. For all the discussion about welcoming people into Jewish communities, there are still in bylaws, as you say, all of these restrictions. You can do this, but you can't do this. You can serve on this committee, but you can't serve on the board. You can serve on the board, but you can't be the president. You can be the president, but you have to, do it with your left hand. I don't know what all the rules are. So that is a breath of fresh air to hear it from somebody who, albeit came from our secular Jewish world, but you went into the theistic world, where I will be honest with you, most of what I hear honestly does come back to Brit, covenant with God. If you don't make this covenant with God, then you're not a member of the community fully, etc. So this is all by way of, since this is a conversation, and I usually don't talk quite so much, but I'm so enthused to hear your point of view. But this comes by way of also asking, how do you handle, and I know how we handle it with openness and acceptance. How do you handle this idea of multiple identities? I will tell you that as a conventional rabbi coming into this movement from the Reform and Conservative world, that was harder for me. Now I get it, but I'm curious how you look at it in Reform, Conservative, etc.
So I think the issue of multiple religious belonging, multiple identities, multi-faith is really hard for people. And I understand that. Like when I tell my story, sometimes I get full on gasps. And I don't take that personally, I should say, because I understand that and we can talk about numbers, but we fight about the numbers. So I sometimes say the numbers aren't important, which is, by the way, really hard for me as a sociologist who loves demography. Like, it's hard for me to say, but the numbers don't matter. So my view, and there's very different views in the community, but when I bring my children to our Reform temple, I don't expect our temple to address the other parts of them. I don't need them to meld the Catholicism with the Judaism and all of the other identities, because we all hold lots of identities. I want them to be engaged in their Jewish selves, fully engaged in their Jewish selves, while being totally open and honest that we have other selves too, and that's okay. And people always, again, when you, I like your examples of, but what about this, and with your left hand, and because people do that too. People want to dive so far into the theology, usually, of what it means to have multiple religious identities. And the way I look at it, and maybe this is my secular Judaism background coming out, but I can get so much as a Jew, and I identify with one religion. I get so much out of attending services in Islam. I've been to Sikh services. I've been to Hindu services, all types of Christian services, and that can reinforce and help my Judaism. That expands my mind. All of those things are good things. So for those of us who do hold identities that are both and, you know, my children are both Jewish and Catholic. I am both Jewish and a member of the Catholic community, even if I don't believe in the theology, which again, not problematic in this setting. That's all fine. And I just want the Jewish community to engage us where we are and not put up, again, going back to the topic of gatekeeping, not putting up false barriers that aren't helpful. And
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're running short on time. As Denise Handlarski, our rabbi who wrote the A to Z of intermarriage, pointed out, it is a little bit easier when we're dealing. It's hard to be a theist and a not theist at the same time. So when you take it into a humanistic or into a secular way of talking about it, you're talking about cultural heritage and so forth. Maybe that's why it's easier for us, because I do think that many rabbis who believe in God, and I'm not one of them, struggle with, you know, how do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God and not the Son of God at the same time? So I do get that there are certain kinds of boundaries, but I think that they are the internal boundaries that people set for themselves and what they're, you know, what they prioritize. In our movement, we prioritize the cultural connection. So yes. It's not quite as, I guess it's not quite as challenging when you become a humanistic or secular Jew. But I think that that's the beauty of you having come in from secular Judaism with this very broad understanding. You're applying it to your community of choice, which is a theistic Jewish world. And I'm looking forward to seeing how your research and your personal experience continues throughout your life, because I think it's a wonderful example to those of us who really do seriously preach this inclusivity. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Happy Shavuot.
Thank you for having me. Chag Sameach. May everyone just be blessed with a wonderful spring that we're having.
Absolutely. And Mazel Tov on the happy Simcha, the joyous occasion of your bar mitzvah coming up this weekend. And I look forward to meeting you in person at some time in the not too distant future. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
ערב של שושנים נצא נא אל הבוסתן מור וסנים ולבונה לרגלך מפתן לילה יורד לאט ורוח שושן נושבה Hava el chashlach shir balat zemer shel ahava.
At the opening of tonight's Shabbat program, I mentioned the words of the prophet Isaiah. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. The poet Yehuda Amichai wrote this: Don't stop after beating the swords into plowshares. Don't stop. Go on beating and making musical instruments out of them. Whoever wants to make war again will have to turn them into plowshares first. We've come once again to that moment in our community where we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who seek love and support, those who are ill and suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these members of our community and to their loved ones, to Joe Gaden, Julie Eliason, Karen Tremper Harris, Myron Tink, and Rabbi Peter Schweitzer. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. We are there for them. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, we observe the yahrzeits of Shirley Bluestein, Eli Bricker, Marvin Cherish, Harold Dennenberg, Sally Eder, Ann Ellenbogen, Asher J. Finkel, Aaron Fryer, Morton Fryer, Gertrude Fryer Wax, Edith Goldstone, Herbert Goldstone, Sonia Haas, Max Halpern, David Kahn, Harold Malinsky, Irving Reiter, Clara Roman, Bertha Zucker, and Jacob Zucker. Yehi zichram livracha. May the memories of these beloved and precious individuals provide a source of comfort for those who now see life and tread the path of life in their absence. That's our Shabbat tonight, our Shavuot program. I look forward to seeing you virtually tomorrow night at our trivia night on Zoom. And I wish you all a night of peace, peace for us and for the whole world. Good night.